Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton, Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, today is a special episode of Supply Chain Buzz right here on Supply Chain Now. Are you excited?
I am. Brought to you by Hurricane Zeta, this special edition of the Supply Chain Buzz, right?
Seriously. I tell you, as we both have felt firsthand, that was a fast-moving storm that really packed a punch inland, right?
Yeah, it did. 2 days without power will give you a lot of empathy for people who go through this frequently, like the folks on the Gulf Coast. I mean, we barely got skimmed, and it was tough to deal with, no doubt.
Yep. Well, on a much lighter note, on this episode, we're going to be sharing key insights from one of the leading transportation industry resources. Of course, we're talking about the U.S. Bank Freight Payment Index, this one for Q3 that we're going to dive into and review. So looking forward to that. Greg, one of our favorite parts is we're going to get key takeaways, both from the data and the pro to know there, but also on the shipping and the practitioner side. We're balancing what the data tells us with what our shippers are seeing day in and day out, right?
Yeah, that's right. What people are experiencing on the seas and the skies and the streets.
That is right. Hey, before we introduce our guests, we'll do two things. We'll say hello to a few folks, and then also want you to kind of weigh in on U.S. Bank's prowess when it comes to serving the industry.
Sure.
So real quick, looking forward to having the Wild West, the audience here. We got Mike Aver with us. Good afternoon, Mike. Of course, Clay Phillips, the dog, is behind the scenes making it happen. Him and Amanda. Tina Elliott is with us here via LinkedIn. Great to see you, Tina. Of course, Daria, who joined us for a lot of these live streams. Daria Patel, hopefully this finds you well. Jamin is with us, and that's an important one. So Jamin leads our Logistics and Beyond series. Freight is his back, his right up his alley. He's going to be driving conversations in the comments as we dive into this data. Greg, Pratik, Sophia, Wilma, Kavan. We got the full gang here today.
Yeah, we
ready
do.
To dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's set the stage a little bit, Greg. So tell us about U.S. Bank and how they power the transportation industry, which of course is the backbone of global supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, the reason that they can offer us all these compelling insights, right, in this report, and I hope because you had a couple days, I encouraged everybody to do your homework this weekend, which I did by candlelight, watching, reading the report over once again. But look, U.S. Bank did $28.8 billion worth of freight payment transactions last year. So that's an incredible amount of data for the whole industry. It gives them a ton of data to be able to analyze and look at and help us understand what has happened in the last quarter. And of course, because they're a bank, they're limited to saying that, right? I think they can't say what the future could hold, but that's what we've got other people here for, is to say, hey, here's what the data tells us. Here's what is happening on the ground, and here's what we can expect into the future. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of those things, not just what the data says, what it means to people's lives, what it means to the transportation industry, and a little bit about what it's telling us for the future.
Outstanding. Let's do it. So real quick, Professor AA is with us, and Chris Barnes just joined us as well, amongst the others that are tuned in across 5 social platforms. So welcome, everybody. Let's welcome in our featured guests here today. So we have Bobby Holland, Vice President and Director of Freight Data Solutions with U.S. Bank, and he's joined with Eric Olson, Outside Sales Manager with Total Quality Logistics, LLC. All right. Good afternoon, Bobby. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Great to have you back. We're much better.
Great having you back.
And in an hour, Greg, me and you are going to be much more educated from Bobby and Eric. And Eric, good afternoon. How you doing?
Doing great, Scott. Thanks for having me on, and I'm glad to see you guys are back up and running.
We are too. I'll tell you, it's been an eventful weekend.
Yeah.
But hey, there are folks that are struggling far worse than Wi-Fi and power, and those folks certainly are in our thoughts and prayers right now. So on a much lighter note, Greg, let's dive in. Let's get to know our guests a little bit better. I want to start with Bobby. Our listeners may recognize Bobby from some of his past appearances here. But Bobby, in a nutshell, tell us about Bobby Holland.
Let's see. I come from a software engineering, software architecture background. I've been with US Bank for about 4 years, and myself and my team, we are a product team that are responsible for creating, as the name of the group is, Freight Data Solutions. We use the data from our Syncada platform, and that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. That's right. And there's so much, the insights. Greg and I really enjoy diving into this each quarter because, Greg, as we've talked about, I don't have any truck driving experience. I've shipped some of my career, and the wealth of data here, especially balanced from the data and business side with a shipper that we're going to learn more about, a provider, really offers a balanced view. So, Eric, for our audience, Eric Olson with TQL, tell us more about yourself.
Thanks, Scott. Eric Olson. I'm with Total Quality Logistics. I am currently outside sales manager here. I've been at TQL for about 14 years and sort of seen every part of the company in that time. I spent some time on the sales side. I spent some time on our risk management side, product management, even over on the finance side. That's how I started our relationship with US Bank. Now my team is responsible for relationships with some of our key customers and key outside vendors, and so we're constantly having conversations, watching the market, trying to determine what happens next, trying to determine the best ways to provide the best service that we possibly can. We're in kind of a unique position here at TQL. Obviously, we're a broker, so we kind of sit in the middle. We're not full carrier. We're certainly not full shipper. So I hope I can provide some perspective kind of from both sides of that today. I certainly don't claim to be the voice of one or the other or anybody really. But it's been Q3 was interesting. Q4 has been interesting as well, and I'm looking forward to tackling what the index shows us with Bobby.
Outstanding. So, Greg, in the comments, folks are diving right in. It looks like a lot of weekend recapping between leaves and football, and hope that they're ready for freight. So, Greg, take it away.
Yeah. Well, I think what would be great is to understand, Bobby, maybe remind people a little bit about what I shared just a couple minutes ago about what it is that makes US Bank such a great resource for all this data. And then share a little bit about what the Freight Payment Index is, what it analyzes, how it works.
Okay. Well, as you had mentioned earlier in the intro, we process almost $29 billion annually in payments, shipments and payments. And with this data, we collect terabytes of data. And so our ability to take this data and do the requisite analysis has enabled us to create this index. And you asked what the Freight Payment Index is, and it's basically a tool that we've developed that extrapolates the economy at large from our data. We compare our shipment data, payments data from quarter to quarter to create our quarterly index. It's a chain-based index, so each quarter is is compared only to the previous quarter, as opposed to year zero. Getting all nerdy here, but the idea is that because it enables us to compare, we call it a same-store sales type algorithm. It allows us to compare similar activity across quarters so that we can accurately measure the deltas and not just measure US Bank's business performance. So that's why we believe it's a good indicator of what's going on in the industry and the economy at large. So that's how it works.
Yeah. And I think the important part of that is that kind of same store sales model, right? It's the same metrics compared against one another from quarter to quarter and year over year. So you don't get those variances if a new carrier comes in or something like that can really impact things. It is apples to apples every quarter and every year. And that gives us a great jumping off point. So Eric, knowing that, and of course, knowing that you're in the middle of the transaction, you do get to hear from the carriers and from the shippers both. Tell us a little bit about how you all use it, or how the carriers and shippers that you work with use it.
Yeah, it's a valuable source of information, right? We have so much data coming in that's that's specific to us, right? We're monitoring the market on the carrier side. We're monitoring the market on the shipper side. We're trying to make predictions about what's going on. We have all kinds of key internal metrics, but also we want to make sure that we're, really have a good objective view of what's going on outside these walls, outside of our business. Because again, we're a large company. We move a lot of freight, but we don't move really any major fraction of it overall. And so US Bank is a really, really valuable resource to sort of throw into that mix as a data point for us to use. Their customers, their shipper customers, are some of the largest companies in the country and in the world, and we've always found that their information is pretty representative of what's going on in the freight market at large. Especially over the last couple of years, there's been such a huge emphasis on data in this industry. That we would be doing ourselves, our carriers, our customers a disservice if we weren't looking at everything that we possibly could. So the U.S. Bank has always played a pivotal role in that. Again, we know that we know what their shippers are moving. We know how reflective of it is as a market at large, and so this is always a day one, hour one, kind of spread it around and everybody take a look at it when this index comes out.
Yeah.
All right. So a couple quick comments before we dive in with this quarter's index with Bobby. So, of course, Mike states what we all know: freight drives the economy in many ways. And Mike, great to have you here with us here today. David says that he's always ready for freight. Scott, always ready for freight. And then let's see, Jamin called out again the 29 billion worth of transactions, and as Bobby said, the terabytes worth of data. Here in the information age, that's certainly one of the great advantages is we're able to not just collect all that information, but dive into that truly big data and figure out what the signals are versus the noise. And that's really, in my view, what makes reports like the Freight Payment Index so valuable, right, Greg?
I can't remember the specific number, so I won't quote it when we've done this in the past. But that 29 billion is a significant portion of all of the freight transactions in the country. So, it is a huge data set by analysis standards. Bobby would say that is a relative oversampling. I mean, it is a huge statistical sample. So it is a great indicator of what's going on in the marketplace.
Agreed. Professor A says, he's quoting Josue, if the wheels aren't turning, you aren't earning. Agreed there, Professor. Thanks for bringing that in. Yep. And Jamin says, finding a true objective data resource to make better decisions is huge. Agreed. All right. So let's bring Bobby Holland back in. Bobby, let's at a 50,000 foot level, altitude level, let's kind of hear what you say the data is telling us, especially from a national point of view. So what are you seeing?
Well, the data is telling us currently that we experienced a recession. We had outside sources that called that in Q2. Mm-hmm. And what we see, the result in coming out in Q3 is how well the industry is managing itself through that. We see that the shipment index was up 6% from the second quarter, which was the largest quarterly gain since Q2 2019. Still down from a year earlier of 7.6%, but the spend index had more than twice the velocity at 14.6% over the second quarter. And this is for a variety of reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into as we continue to walk through this. But what it says is that a lot of the decisions that were made in Q2, we're seeing the results of that, whether the decisions be around the stay-at-home orders and COVID, which obviously restricts and dries up a lot of things, or the decisions that the carriers and the shippers have made to adapt their particular businesses to cope and to deal with and to succeed in the adapted or the new marketplace. So we see a lot of that, and we see that it's we see main drivers such as e-commerce retailers, we see home improvement stores, grocery stores, and residential construction, and these are all things that never really shut down, but because things are starting to open up, the activity's increased. We see continued strength in e-commerce sales, as well as brick and mortar stores as well. Again, as people start to go out and start to feel better, about going out and shopping as opposed to, obviously the online is a part of our life, going forward. Online shopping is, but even being able to go to the mall, as things opened up in early Q3, we can see that impact on freight. We see other parts of the industry struggling. Tanker trucks continue to struggle because
Right.
they're still down. So we still see that. We see flatbed carriers having strong volumes, but industrial side of flatbed are still down because chemicals are down and metal production is down. So again, a lot of mixed things going on, but all in all, we see things generally picking up. And that's what we see it in Q2 as the trajectory of the virus goes. That's where freight's going to go. Right now, things are opening up and people are starting to feel better about being out and about in most cases. And so it's starting to reflect that in shipping in the trucking industry.
Outstanding, Bobby. Eric, I'm sorry, Greg, I want you to weigh in on something Bobby shared there before we start moving more towards regionally.
Yeah, well, I think the surprise, I guess, shouldn't have been a surprise, but that tanker volume was down. That's honestly, when I read through this, that was a bit of a surprise for me. But I get it, and I think the other thing is with home improvement. I think this really speaks to, and maybe Jamin can address this too, but I think this really speaks to the diversification of transport types in the transportation industry. I think flatbeds. I just think all flatbeds, right? Not an industrial type versus a commercial, just plain commercial type. So I had not thought of the variance at that level of micro detail. So that's really interesting. And I think that, one of the other things we've got to think about is that the cases of COVID are up. And I know Bobby can't really speak to the futures there, but the cases of COVID are up. And yet, as he said, people are really a whole lot more comfortable. I think we're starting to discover that the mortality rate is very, very focused on a limited population and much, much lower than we expected it to be. So I wonder how that's going to impact the future, but certainly that's going to impact the future.
Yep.
There.
So good stuff there, Greg. Bobby, at a very high level, because we're going to go region by region here momentarily after we get Greg and Eric and the audience weigh in on some of these initial observations. But give us a couple thoughts around what we're seeing regionally.
Well, the main takeaway is that most everything is up, apart from the shipment index in the Southwest. All of the other indexes across the regions were up sequentially over Q2 in Q3. And again, the reason we have the regional perspective is because there are different influences. We can take the national view, and that's obviously a conglomeration of everything. But when you break it down by region, each region has different influences and different drivers that will moderate how their shipments and spend are impacted. And again, we see that in the fact that the Southwest was down 0.5% from the previous quarter, whereas all the other shipment and spend indexes were up.
Yep. All right, and led by the southeastern region, which we're gonna dive more into. Eric, I want to bring you back in here in just a second to get some of your initial reaction at some of these high level observations. But Greg, let's share a few comments here. We got no shortage of them. Pierre says, completely agree. The value is not the incredible amount of data, but the thought process in delivering information that is factual and usable. And Pierre, I get your second question. I'll pose that to Bobby and Eric as we dive in deeper here. And Jamin says, great point, Greg. Open deck market is very niche-y. And he asked if that's a word. We make up words all the time here on the Buzz. So runs a wide range of industry sectors. All right. So, Eric, quick comment on some of what you've heard here, just kind of setting the table.
Well, we certainly experienced the increases that Bobby talked about quarter over quarter. The way that we saw things happen in the spring, with lockdowns, with the height of the life changes regarding the pandemic, was kind of a bottoming out, and then it's been it's been a steady increase, and at times a pretty dramatic increase since then. Some of what we've seen, even year over year, we've seen stronger. I'm interested to kind of dig in more into some of these regions with the year over year comps to find out about that. but the thing that always interests me is obviously, again, we talked about US Bank has so much information, and Bobby touched on, you touched on it when you were talking about this, the consumer is the driver of all this, right? Like there's so much of this demand, so much of these increases that are consumer based. I would love to see a breakdown someday of by your different segments exactly what those indexes look like quarter over quarter, because we see it regionally, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to some of the regions. But sometimes even sometimes even a region that's a part of a larger whole, there are pockets within that region that are not reflective of what the rest of the region is doing. So I'm curious to dig more into the specifics on that to find what you're missing. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it visualized. That would probably be a fun intersecting lines in some cases. But we can talk about that more as we go on.
Eric, I love how you think. You're painting a picture, a data masterpiece, at least between my ears. All right.
One thing that go ahead, Eric.
Pierre said it right. Like the clean and usable data is important, and it's just, again, maybe it's just me, but the pictures help, right? I mean, hearing about it, thinking about it, percentages are great, but when we can kind of see the movement over time, that really an important part of that is sort of where you've been. Like, okay, here's how things are now, but where do we come from? Is it better than it was a year ago? Is it better than it was 5 years ago? Do we think it's going to continue? That visualization can be really powerful.
All right, agreed. Greg, I'm going to pose a couple of questions here as we kind of do some color commentary before we dive into region by region. And Greg, we've got a couple of interesting questions here. And Bobby, want to pose these to you, and Greg and Eric, y'all feel free to weigh in, of course. Pierre says, hey, how much of the increase is due to the China recovery and increased imports? Bobby, any response you have there?
I can't quantify the exact percentage, but we do know that that's part of the reason that the West region had posted such a strong gain is due to the strength of imports from Asia. So, LA, Long Beach, Oakland, and SeaTac all together have about 40% of Asian shipping. And again, strong port volumes help to improve the West. So it's significant.
Yep. Okay. Good stuff.
Yeah,
Great
we've heard
question.
a lot about jam ups, in which Jamin should probably run down there and help with. Long Beach is, as usual, jammed up, and just a ton of congestion in that port. So maybe Jamin, you could jump down there and help them out. I think another thing that's important to think about for this year is, Bobby, think back to when we did the first one of these. Mm-hmm. We knew that 2019 was an anomaly as far as shipping, right? And we talked about that in the very first one of these analyses of the freight payment index, of how much higher it was than 2019 and how we expected towards the second half of the year. This was before pre-COVID.
Correct.
Towards the second half of the year, we expected it to get pretty ugly in terms of shipping. And instead, we saw the big dip, of course, but kind of forced by COVID. But we're starting to see it come back. And if you look at the numbers compared to 2018 instead of 19, it's not as big of an issue as it might appear. I mean, in terms of a drop. So I think that's something we have to acknowledge as well, is that 2019 was such an anomaly in terms of volume.
Great point. Great point.
Right. And because of that, as we stated to your point, it was at such a relatively high velocity at that point that even though some of the drops sounded catastrophic, we have to remember the starting point.
Right.
So, and we're still going through that. So everything was still going a lot stronger than people realize, even with pre-COVID. And so it kind of helps put these numbers in perspective.
Yep. One other comment right before we go region by region is Professor AA talks about how he wonders how much of the freight is trending towards warehouses and last mile delivery rather than to retail stores. And one of the things the report calls out, and we'll probably talk more about it, is the restocking that was taking place, the catch up on inventory that thankfully we've made a few strides in, and curious to see how much of the volume that drove. Bobby, any quick comment on that?
Well, I think one of the themes that we saw throughout was that retail spending was still, pretty stable. Obviously, with shifts in things and stores closing or shutting down, stay-at-home orders, the online shipping was pretty constant. It actually increased because, again, what else are people going to do? They can't go anywhere. So, between grocery deliveries and other deliveries and other online shopping, that stayed fairly consistent. So what we're saying is that retail sales, now that the malls are opening back up, we're starting to see more of that. People were always spending money on retail, but it was just mainly online. But now, we see it starting to go back up now that those stores are back open on the brick and mortar side.
Gotcha. Okay. And
I think
go ahead, Eric.
we saw an outsized impact from that on the pricing side too, because as e-commerce grows overall and as it really became as vital as it was during the pandemic, those delivery windows are really important if you got to have a courier bring it out to somebody's house the next day or 2 days later or something like that. So there was a lot more, as capacity tightened, there's a lot more inherent risk in the types of shipments that carriers were taking. The penalties for late deliveries are more, the service expectations from the shippers are more, and so that all factors into the pricing. So when you see the spend start to diverge from the volume increase in some cases, I really think, at least we see regionally in some of those areas with a lot of e-commerce hubs or heavy warehousing type activity, we see the spend increasing even more because of that.
Outstanding.
Yeah, to your point, we had came across an article that talked about Amazon being impacted by trying to I won't say barge in, because I don't mean it a negative thing, but basically enter that and start to compete with other resources for truckload capacity.
Right.
It kind of dovetails with what Eric was saying as far as they're having to compete. It's such a shortage, but they're putting pressure on that marketplace. And so we can see the impact of that as the rates kind of outpace the actual shipment volumes.
Bobby, sorry, what was the name of that company you said?
Amazon.
What?
Amazon.
I'll have to look that up. Thanks.
They seem to be coming on pretty strong, Eric. Maybe
Greg,
talk about them once or twice, maybe.
Eric will fit right in with Nerfod and our other residents, professionals with a nice sense of humor. So, and by the way, welcome Nerfod and welcome Josue. Josue, your ears may have been burning. We were quoting you earlier in the live stream.
Yes, sir.
One final comment. This comes from Mike Aver. Wall Street Journal quoted last week a 21.2% increase in containers that are sitting more than 5 days at the port of LA. Kind of some of that stuff you were talking about earlier, Greg. All right. So we've been promising going region by region. So we're going to get a little more detailed into some of these differences we're seeing. Bobby, let's talk about the Southeast first. Give us a take or two on that.
Well, the Southeast was up 12.5% over the second quarter. And it was actually up 5% from a year earlier. So again, just pretty good numbers there. Only region to post double-digit gains in shipments and spend, while also having that year-over-year increase. And we can see a lot of reasons for this. Again, the stay-at-home orders were lifted a lot earlier in the Southeast region and stayed that way. We can also see too that the summer and Q2 that people were beginning to go vacation. Yeah, the numbers were down from a traditional tourist season, but people were still wanting to get out. People were still wanting to go to the beach, and even though the numbers were reduced, they were still out there over what they were earlier in the year. And so we're seeing again as things shift industries, we're seeing that spending increased on those vacation activities and all the things that support that. And then we also, of course, have the storm prep and storm damage repair. So again, it's one of the reasons why the Southeast tends to stay stronger for a variety of reasons. But that's what we saw in Q3.
Outstanding. Hey, to our audience, y'all tell us what you're seeing, whether it agrees with the data and what Bobby and Eric and Greg are sharing, or if it doesn't. We'd love to get your take, whether it's by region or in the bigger picture. All right. So Eric, staying with the Southeast, quick observation from you.
The Southeast, we tend to see some of the most intense seasonality there of anywhere, in a non-pandemic year. And so what U.S. Bank saw, what Bobby sees in the numbers really tracks, right? That intense seasonality is always there. We tend to win a lot of our contracted freight out of that region just because of the flexibility that we have. And so we're always kind of battling that. And I think that right when some of that seasonality should have been kicking in again in Q2, a lot of the lockdowns happened, and so when everything opened back up, especially coming out of the southeast, like it really exacerbated the seasonality that we see. So that was a region of particular interest and a huge upward trend for us as well.
We've seen a lot in the southeast of shipments that were going into the northern ports going into Charleston and Savannah as well, and a lot of China shipments because Bobby, early in the year, because of the jam ups on the West Coast, they were sending it through the canal to Charleston and Savannah, and Jackson. Anyway, some of the other East Coast ports or Southeast ports, and I think that has had a big impact that is probably staying. They aren't getting better, unfortunately, in the Northeast ports, and the problem continues to exacerbate on the West Coast ports as well. So we're going to see a lot. I think we're going to see a lot of that movement towards those ports, at least for goods that are coming in and staying east of the Mississippi.
Yeah, no doubt.
So Larry shares needing more trucks on the road. Agreed. And one of the constraints we had there, gentlemen,
Right.
was the drivers. Not only, of course, we all know that about the ongoing driver shortage, but the social distancing guidelines that everybody was mostly following prevented a lot of the training and getting out the door of new drivers, right? So no shortage of challenges as we scrape, claw, and get ourselves out of a lockdown phase. All right. And also one other quick comment. Rob says, thanks for the content, guys. Rob, I agree. Eric and Bobby, bring it. Bobby in particular, every quarter. I find this conversation and observations and the data fascinating, especially, since transportation is not where I spent the bulk of my supply chain career. All right. So let's keep driving. We go from the Southeast, Bobby, to the Northeast. So tell us more.
Well, the Northeast, as we all know from news reports and all, was hit the hardest, or appeared to be hit the hardest with the virus.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're still coming out of that. Just more recently had, lockdown relief, if you will. So it only increased 1.7% over the second quarter, but it's still an improvement. We'll take it. The spin index, though, however, was up 12.1%. So again, that usually indicates capacity shortage. Significant volume declines during the previous 6 quarters. And again, manufacturing's big up here, so that's still struggling to ramp up. So we're still the recovery up here is going to be a little slower than in some of the other regions. But shipments started to increase in the third quarter, so we'll see what it looks like in Q4.
Good news. Hopefully, more of it ahead. Eric, I'm gonna get you to weigh in one second here. I want to bring Jamin's comment back in. Speaking of drivers and training, we need more creative and effective training methods given new safety limitations. That training challenge was one of the most fascinating little details in the report. Very good talk by U.S. Bank.
Yeah,
right.
So Bobby addressed that specifically, your team, Bobby. I'm sure you didn't actually type it. But anyway, they addressed that of course, people are trying to train drivers, but because of the social distancing measures and capacity in the training facilities, they weren't able to train as many new drivers. Not to mention that, that a lot of the incoming generations are not inclined to be drivers. And I think we have offline at least discussed how the industry needs to address that, is to get, is to make it more palatable to be a driver. A lot of people don't want to drive for 14 days straight.
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of it too is I've read about, new regulations continuing to come on board that is keeping the attrition, higher than the industry would like. A lot of drivers just saying, we're not doing this anymore. And so, you take that and couple it with the inability to properly, provision more drivers.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add on top of that all the decisions that were made in previous quarters to adapt. And that's why we're ripe for a capacity shortage now.
All right. Eric, weigh in on this or the Northeastern region.
Yeah, I think we were pretty well aligned with what Bobby said there. I mean, he pointed out kind of the spend index going up. We have a couple of key internal capacity indicators, and we saw those really increase to sort of above peak 2018 levels in the Northeast for at least part of the quarter. So there was some sign to us of some more activity there. But again, overall, it was the longer lockdowns coupled with sort of no growing, limited manufacturing, and all that kind of sort of kept it more in line with the quarter over quarter than the rest of the regions for us too.
Outstanding. All right, the whole drive, it always does. The driver comments and conversation we're having gets a ton of attention. There's lots of passion around that. I do want to share, Greg, going back to your point about using the different ports. I'm going to read this because they'll cut off Eric and Bobby when they don't want to cut off their images here. But he says the owner of Crane Logistics was interviewed a few years ago by a publication, and he or she said that there's too many people in LA and Long Beach. His team's drivers were able to make more turns in Savannah, so his freight forwarders were going to ship everything through Savannah, Charleston, Jacksonville, as opposed to West Coast ports. Interesting, Mike. I appreciate you sharing that. And here's one sentiment that we all, I'm sure, welcome. So AA says, I see no shortage of food on my table and necessities in my home due to a robust and resilient freight and logistics. Thank goodness.
Can I get an amen there? Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you.
And then finally, one thing about the drivers, again, it gets a ton of attention, but Larry makes a great point. How about treating drivers better as well? A network, perhaps, of truck stops with secure parking areas and free showers. Good stuff there from Larry. Okay. This is a fast-moving conversation, Greg. Are you buckled up? We're going to move.
Yeah. This one has been deep, hasn't it, already? I mean, yeah, I'm ready. My hands and arms are inside the vehicle.
There we go. Because we're going to the Midwest, and that's your old stomping ground.
Indeed.
The pride of what did Kim call you? The Wichita Wizard, I think is what he called you, because that's your hometown. But Bobby, tell us about what you're seeing from the Midwest.
2.5% up over the second quarter in shipments. It was the first increase in 5 quarters. A lot of COVID spikes in the Midwest. We know that some of the places didn't, even really shut down like the other ones did.
The Dakotas.
But they're also, so because of that, they were a little bit stronger in some ways. But now that they've started some partial shutdowns in order to deal with that during Q3, it hurt spending a bit. And then we also had the big derecho storm that was a negative impact that disrupted things.
Right.
So they're going to be dealing with that as well. But again, they were also hit by the driver shortage. So impact felt across the board in a lot of places.
Yep. Good stuff there. And we should welcome in Rhonda. Rhonda, I could not see your name on LinkedIn, but the team just pointed it out. Sometimes we have a little connectivity issue there, but Rhonda, welcome. And thanks for joining us here via LinkedIn. Okay, so Eric, your take on the Midwest.
Well, I think going back to something that I said early on in the conversation is that even in these regions, which are breakdowns of a whole, there's pockets within them that can really that are really outliers to the rest of the region. And I mean, I think you look at the Midwest region here on the map, and it's so large and so geographically diverse, right? You have sort of rural agrarian areas to big cities to manufacturing locations, and there's a lot of e-commerce in there. So we, again, our capacity indicator showed some pockets that had showed huge growth in both volume and in spend, but the different lockdowns, the disruptions to some of the food supply chains that are based out of that area. It kind of tamped it down, right? It made it as inconsistent or more inconsistent as anything else. Again, I keep thinking about these as hyper specific ways of describing things, because one part of the Midwest was not like another on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis. But overall, sort of the heavy areas pulled it all up for us. We saw tremendous growth in spend and in volume there.
Right. I neglected to mention spend was up 8%. So once again, spending outpaced the shipment growth. So again, usually an indication of capacity issues.
Yep. Good points there.
Eric, is that, and I know you may not work specifically that area, but is that in line with what you have seen, is that there is a shortage of capacity in the Midwest?
Yeah, it is. That was one of the key areas that we identified. And again, part of it was some of the availability shifted with the disruptions early in Q2, and everything is still stabilizing. But again, there's a lot of e-commerce hub activity coming into the Midwest, right? Again, that's sucking up a lot of it. You can look at capacity two ways, which is the truck availability and what the cost of that truck is going to be, and sometimes you're focused on the price, and sometimes you're focused on just getting the truck. But we saw a lot of that. Hey, we got to get a truck. We have to get this picked up, and I think that as e-commerce makes its way across, we're here in Cincinnati, and I'm 6 hours from everything, right? It's a good place to be. I can get to Bobby. I can get up to Chicago in 5-6 hours. I can get to Atlanta in 7. You can get to so many places, and it's even 9-10 all the way to the East Coast. So we're seeing a lot of that come in here because as those quick deliveries become more prevalent, it's a good place to be.
It's interesting that there's so much energy in the Midwest, right? I guess most of it technically in the Southwest, but there's still a lot of oil and gas in the Midwest. And with the tanker volumes down, there must have been something that substantially replaced that to keep that from just absolutely crashing, right?
All right. I know we all love the Midwest. I spent a couple of years in Wichita. I spent some time working for a Cincinnati firm as well, Eric. Great cities indeed. All right, so Bobby, we're going to move from Midwest, and we're going to get some of your observations as it relates to the Southwest, which was a bit of an outlier based on the other regions in the report.
Right. As we stated earlier, this was the shipments index for the Southwest dropped 0.5%. Again, it's the only one of the indexes, the regional indexes that dropped. But again, even though it dropped, spend was up 12%. Didn't quite recoup the 14% drop from Q2 over Q1. But again, capacity shortage, lower energy demand was offset by increased truck transported trade with Mexico. So that's what kept this region rolling. Because I think the last index we talked about how the Southwest was nailed across the board for both of those because of the lower energy consumption, and the trade was just starting to ramp back up post COVID.
Yep.
So,
all right. So Eric, weigh in on the Southwest.
This is one where I would love to see sort of an industry by industry breakdown, because it's pretty rudimentary, but with a lot of Texas being near both, a port and a border crossing, it shares a lot of similarities to Southern California, at least based on what we saw. We saw, some of the most difficult capacity situations that we saw anywhere in the country in Q3 of the year, sort of down near Laredo, all the way up the Gulf Coast area, when the automotive industry kind of turned back on and more things started crossing over the border from Mexico there. But I'm sure if you isolate oil and gas from the numbers, that I think the situation looks a lot different. And we really, really felt that for most of the quarter.
Interesting. All right. So Greg, your comment here, whether you focus a little more on the Midwest or the Southwest, what's something that really stood out?
Well, I think mine is more of a question. I wonder, in as much as USMCA is now in place, if that didn't have some impact on the cross-border shipments, if the hopefully expediting of those shipments vis-a-vis less difficult regulation and less difficult documentation, if that didn't hold some of this up. I don't know if Bobby or you or Eric might have seen either of those things be an impact, but USMCA is one of those things that we just haven't really talked about this year because like everything else, COVID.
Right.
Now, like I said, we did see the trade volumes with Mexico improve, and empirically, you could probably attribute that as you stated. But that was, like I said, that's what offset the drop in energy volume. So
a couple of comments from the audience here. So Jamin talks about the Southwest varies so greatly from shipping point to shipping point. Eric Olson is spot on here as to the diversity of the region. Well said there, Jamin.
Mhm.
And I think this is Rhonda. So Clay and Amanda, y'all correct me if I'm wrong here. Rhonda says, still seeing the impacts on the shelves in Arizona. Notice some items are limited or completely gone and replaced with other items. I would imagine this is a change in production variables too from different companies. Interesting commentary.
Yes,
from
Diet Cherry Dr. Pepper is missing, much to my wife's chagrin. And we know that Coca-Cola cut 200 labels out of their product mix. And many companies have gone to one or two types of particular products to facilitate more expeditious production, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that
Well,
could be part of it.
Yeah, a lot of adaptation going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there is. Continuing along this trend, David, who I believe is in Canada, Greg, right?
Yes.
David, tell us
Yes,
again
yes,
where
yes.
you're from. My
Yeah, he's from
apologies if I got it
Canada
wrong.
because remember, he's the one who mentioned Thanksgiving,
Yes,
Canadian
that's right.
Thanksgiving to us.
He says most of the items in the supermarkets here are on a limit. Yesterday's grocery shop only allowed me to take approximately half my list. Wow, how about that? And Rhonda says it's Sprite
You need
Zero.
Costco.
Sprite Zero that she's missing.
See?
Greg.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I bet we all have something that we're having. I don't know. Probably not me. I don't really vary my. I have a very adventuresome diet.
Well, what's interesting though, this little wrinkle in this conversation we're having, Bobby, Eric, and Greg, is it's really illustrative of this year and how consumers really now know and see when supply chains do get disrupted, exactly how it impacts them. As simple as just not having the Coke of your choice at your disposal, and it really is something we've all probably been guilty of taking for granted for most of our lives, just out of sheer accessibility. And that's one of the silver linings here in 2020, just its sheer appreciation for all the
Can
folks.
you still get the question for Cincinnati, right, Eric, is can you still get all of the types of 5-way chili that are usually available in Cincinnati?
That's right.
I have not noticed any kind of supply shortage there. I think that we have strategic oil reserves for the nation. I believe there's an undisclosed location somewhere deep under the sea where there's strategic chili reserves.
That's good. And the Montgomery Inn still has ribs. That's the important thing.
And the sauce.
Yep.
Let's see here. Jeff shared one last comment, and then we're gonna knock out this last region. Jeff says, "Hey, likewise, Greg. I'm in Toronto. Limited number of certain supplies now, and towels are still out. So folks are still feeling the pains for sure." All right, so Bobby,
Yes.
so much to digest. It's tough to get through all of this outstanding information, and really the commentary from this panel and our audience in an hour. But Bobby, tell us about the West.
West had a strong quarterly gain of 8.8% in shipments, but the spend index jumped 21.7%. It was the most of any of the regions in the second quarter, and this was up 0.4% year over year. So we saw, the only region to see both spending gains, both sequentially and year over year. One of the things that surprised me was the port volumes. And again, we attribute that to retailers replenishing depleted stock or depleted inventories. And we see this also as a temporary thing, but it should bleed over ideally into Q4 as we enter the holiday season. But the West had strong housing starts, and the wildfires perversely, may keep that as a trend as they work to rebuild afterwards. Again, improved retail sales, and again, that was a surprise to me that the West was so strong, given all the stuff that they're going through there.
Agreed. Eric, your take.
Yeah, I think again, Bobby has the extremely well-developed, huge amount of database index, but my sophisticated equation of are you near a port and a border really comes into play here with Southern California, because that you see how much the spend index outpaced the rest of the index, and I mean that was what we saw. We were having determining how to price bids and having conversations with shippers and carriers about pricing. And we could look at an average and say, okay, this is up 35% since the bid went into place, 35%, but we would be up 90, 100, 110% sort of in that pocket.
Wow.
So once everything came over from China, you couple that again with the seasonality that's always there with produce and different commodities like that, and it really drove the situation wild down there. And it hasn't. I mean, it's let up some, but I mean, we talked about the intermodal drayage situation at the ports. That's contributing to that, just sort of continuing right into Q4, just as we start picking up purchases for the holidays and again, normal seasonality. So.
Thank you for sharing, Eric. All right, so
Yeah.
Greg, as we wrap
Drayage
up,
is a major problem at these West Coast ports.
Yep, agreed. As we wrap up the region by region review, Greg, any final comment? I know we want to kind of pick their brain, Eric and Bobby, on what may lie ahead, right?
That, and I think that we want, again, I want to go back to the fact that we have to compare this to 2019, which was an exceptional year by any standard. And all things considered, this is pretty encouraging. And actually, it took me from last quarter to this quarter to figure out why rates could be up when we're still talking about shipments being way down and we're talking about capacity being very tight. But shipments are way down only in regard to 2019, and capacity is actually down. And as Bobby and Eric have both said, not growing at the rate that we would have expected it to because of the shortage of ability to train new drivers. And I think Josue talked a little bit about the difficulty in getting new drivers in because who wants to, like we said, who wants to be away from their family so much? But he had a great potential solution, which is training couples. And I've seen some of those cool rigs that are basically an RV that pulls a trailer, right? So that maybe that's part of the solution. Who knows?
Hey, quick programming note. I think Bobby does have a hard stop at 1. So, Greg, we're going to pose your couple questions to Bobby first. And, Bobby, if we have to swoosh you out and then reconnect after the fact, we will. But really appreciate what you and Eric are sharing.
Yeah.
Greg.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest takeaway here? I mean, you're the expert. I just have an opinion. Right. So what do we take away from this quarter, and what do we expect from Q4 and maybe even into the beginning of the year? Because I think we'd all like to see 2020 go away. So can you give us some insight or even just hope?
Well, I think hope is a good word. The insight that we can take away is that, the improvements in the economy are not fictitious. We have transportation data that proves that, the economy is bouncing back. To what extent is to be determined. And again, we're always going to caveat it. The trajectory is going to follow the virus. If we have, any issues with a second wave or any of those things that they had been predicting back at the beginning of all this, that hit in Q4, all bets are off. But it's looking to be a strong, if any indication is, let's put it that way, it looks like it could possibly be a very strong holiday season. And I think a lot of these companies are banking on that. So as far as what goes in January, who knows? The election's tomorrow. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. Enough said there, right? Enough. Although I feel like we ought to say just one word there, Bobby, and that is vote.
There you go. Very nice.
I'm neutral, but I'm just saying. I still get impacted. Do what you got to do.
Yep.
So let's go ahead. We're going to circle back with you. Bobby, let's make sure folks know how to connect with you and also know how to sign up for the Freight Payment Index.
My contact information is on LinkedIn under Bobby Holland, U.S. Bank. As to get to the index, it's a free subscription. You can go to freight.usbank.com, and there is a landing page that kind of describes what the publication is and gives you the ability to sign up with just a small amount of information, and it will get emailed to you upon publication quarterly.
Outstanding. And, Greg, we've made it easy. One click. We've got a direct link in the show notes. It's free to sign up, as Bobby suggested, and it's chock full of great data every quarter. Right, Greg?
It is, and I mean, it's actually an interesting read. I mean, it's really informative. It's very concise, it's helpful, obviously, to people who are in the industry. I think Clay is dropping it in the comments thread here also. Bobby, I have one suggestion for your marketing folks. Since you have the title sponsorship for the Vikings Stadium, the NFL is enabling voting at football stadiums around the country. Maybe you could have a stand where people could sign up for the Freight Payment Index at least US Bank Stadium.
I'm sure Joy and Ashley are watching and writing that down as we speak.
Awesome. Well, hey,
Yeah.
Eric, if you don't mind, if you can stick around with us, a couple of final questions for you. And Bobby, we want to be respectful of your time. I know you run with 3 full plates
thank
right
you.
now. Love what you bring to the table each quarter for our listeners and frankly, for the Supply Chain Now team. Big thanks for what you do, Bobby.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Always great having you here,
Thanks,
Bobby.
Appreciate
All
it.
right.
Have a great day now.
Big thanks to Bobby Holland, Vice President and Director, Freight Data Solutions with US Bank. Thanks, Bobby.
Take care.
All right, Greg and Eric. We're always calling audibles. With live streaming, you never know. Murphy's
Right.
Law is live and well. But I think Bobby runs from meeting to Zoom call to meeting to meeting.
Well, and we made him move this meeting because of the weather last week, right? So, and by the way, thanks to Eric also for clearing his calendar to be here for this as well. Everybody had things to do, so
Absolutely.
Appreciate everyone's time. But I think, in a way, a great bonus for our Buzz community to see this on the Buzz, right?
Agreed.
And great for us too, because we're getting to have some great confabs on this.
Right. Hey, we're gonna get Eric's take kind of on Greg's question here, but before we do, let's just read a few comments here. There's a ton of soft drink conversations. Evidently, there's a lot of Dr. Pepper fans in the comments.
And we have a few people who I don't think are Cincinnati natives commenting on their various 5-way chilies. Chris Barnes is a Skyline fan.
I was promised no chili talk.
I know.
I'd
I'm
like to
sorry.
skip over those, but
It's a very controversial season, Eric. We just
I'm
have to
aware.
accept this.
I'm from Detroit originally. I moved into it, and I try to stay out of it.
Smart, very smart,
Very
smart.
It can be really heated. No joke.
That's right. That is right. Hey, really quick, a few comments here. Going back to drivers, Mike Avers shares that we had a couple team who drove for 8 years together, lived out of their rig until they saved enough to build their home. Wow. One of the most dependable teams we had. Jamin follows up with that and says, seen some solid teams like that as well in his experience. They always seemed like they were having fun while they did it.
Do they have a YouTube channel is the question I would ask, right? You think about all these digital nomads with their YouTube channels and their vans.
Right.
It'd be interesting to watch a driving couple.
Agreed.
Cool.
Sounds like great a real world TV to me.
Yeah.
So Clay, to Greg's point, we have dropped the link to the Freight Payment Index in the comments. It's also on the show notes.
Thank you, Clay.
And let's see here. There's one other I was going to share here. Oh, Jamin also wanted to say solid stuff. Eric Olson, really dug hearing from your point of view. So appreciate it. Good stuff there, Jamin. All right. So, Greg, let's see if Eric will break out his crystal ball just a little bit here with us here today.
Now that we shed the suit, right, Eric, you can share with us what you think is coming for the future. We won't tell Bobby.
Yeah, I'll pass. No, I think that all the discussion that we had today and kind of what Bobby ended it with really focused on it. I mean, the transportation indicates that what the economy is doing is real. We see it in the numbers, and again, I mean, U.S. Bank's numbers are really, really good. They're not just looking at different markets and different economic indicators. I mean, they're paying freight invoices for some of the largest companies in North America. They have a really good handle on what's actually going on a sequential basis like that. So I just think it sounds like Bobby and I are kind of on the same picture. The consumer is so important in all this. We've seen strong consumer demand. We've seen strength in all these consumer-driven markets. So I think the question is going to be how strong does that stay, and does some of the industrial, whether it's energy, whether it's something else, does that catch up? Because if it doesn't, then we've still got a busy Q4 ahead of us. We've still got a lot of potential disruption. We still have a capacity issue. And if that industrial catches up even a little bit, I mean, then you're talking about really, really some explosive growth in shipments and in spend and in the headaches that everybody's going to have to deal with. And so, again, us sitting in the middle, we're always making sure that we're taking care of our carriers as best we can. We had the comments in there earlier about, hey, let's treat drivers better. That's such an easy thing and so obvious, and something that has to be brought up again and again, because it just gets lost in business. And then on the shipper side, we want to make sure that we're being realistic about what the environment is. I'm happy to get on here and talk about this. I like that US Bank makes that information available for free, because it when things started to explode in Q3, it didn't exactly make sense. The economic news was all doom and gloom. There were so many lockdowns. Everything was just so different, and we were sitting here looking at our volume numbers, looking at the KPIs that we have on what the market's doing. Like, wow, how much longer can this keep up? But now, again, we have a little bit better handle on it. I don't want to overstate how strongly we feel about it, but we're at an elevated level with capacity tightness. We have all kinds of disruptions that are just kind of looming over us, and then we have the fourth quarter seasonality ahead of us. So I think it's going to be, I guess depending on what your take on it is, it's either going to be fun or terrifying, or maybe both.
Right, maybe both.
So it's a fascinating time to be in supply chain for sure. It's been one of those years that's, of course, presented a shortage of very unique challenges, but it's been one of those years also, as I think we can all probably speak to, that's going to make the industry much stronger. I hate to use that word resilient, but using that in a very meaningful, practical, and definitive way. And as Greg and I like to talk about, this is what we've been experiencing and working through. We're going to be, business schools are going to have plenty to study for years to come, right, Greg?
They are, and I think one of Eric's observations, and I think Jamin may have already commented on this, is it doesn't make sense, or it's not intuitive, right? Or it's not what we would have expected, or it's not what common sense would indicate. The truth is, and that's the beauty of what Eric said, the numbers don't lie. And regardless of what we expected or what we think is coming in the future, or what or what we've seen in the past, these numbers, and I can't state it strongly enough, the objectivity of these numbers is so important, because to quote a great philosopher, they ain't got no dog in this fight, right? They're just reporting. US Bank is just reporting what the data is telling them. They're not trying to boost shipments. They're not trying to boost prices. They're not trying to facilitate carriers or additional drivers or anything. They are just reporting what they are seeing in the marketplace, with a huge percentage of the transactions in this marketplace. And that's super valuable, unbelievably valuable.
I really appreciate you bringing Socrates' perspective into our conversation here today,
right,
Greg. But, hey, kidding aside, Eric, really appreciate your time. I love how well-versed you are, both at the national level and region by region, which really pairs well with this report from US Bank, the Freight Payment Index. Let's make sure folks know how to connect with Eric, Greg.
Yeah, sure. Well, I appreciate the chance to come on and talk. And we have a lot of smart people around here that helped me do my homework. I knew I was coming on with Bobby, that I couldn't rely on my wit and guile. But you can find me on LinkedIn. Eric Olson. I'm here at Total Quality Logistics. Our social media here at TQL is Life at TQL. That's on Facebook and Instagram. We like to publicize a lot of the fun stuff we have going on around here. We do a lot of things for the people that work here, for our families, and again, like I say, I think Jamin said, scary fun for the fourth quarter. It certainly will be, and we are working to make sure that we're providing the best service to our customers and to our carriers, and we're also trying to stay involved in the community. We've got an initiative right now for our Moves That Matter to donate $1 million in transportation over the next couple of years, and so
nice.
We're working with our employees, our shippers, with anybody that wants to get involved, looking for ways to make an impact, for donations, for things that people need help transporting. So we are keeping our eye on everything, and we are really, really excited about what the future holds. It's been obviously it's been a hard year, and there are plenty of people out there who are still struggling, right? And we want to make sure that we're not losing sight of that. So we're going to work hard. We're going to get involved in our communities, and we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that we can make Q4 in 2021 the best we possibly can.
Outstanding. Greg, when we're doing our homework on TQL, as Eric joined the program, very first thing that comes out through any Google search is some of the community program that y'all do. And Eric, really appreciate that. A lot of kindred spirits in that regard. Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, and let's not underestimate Eric's wit and guile, because while he didn't get much opportunity to present it here, we can tell you assuredly from the preparatory conversations that he's got it. So, So I can't wait to. We ought to have a show where he just gets to tell us what he thinks.
Greg, I know we had a little bit of AV challenge as is commonplace in 2020, but I thought Eric brought it.
He definitely brought it.
Our audience.
We just didn't get to have as much fun conversation because we had the banker here. You know how that worked.
Well, really enjoyed it, Eric. Really appreciate your time, both pre-show and throughout the live stream here today. Love the balance. Greg, we're a big fan. Greg and I and the whole team here are big fans of kind of presenting that balanced approach when it comes to comprehensive data like this. And Eric, really enjoyed your that practical point of view that you did bring.
Well, thank you, guys. I appreciate the kind words again. I thought all that stuff was supposed to be off the record. If we need to raise the blinds so my face is shrouded, then maybe we can get to some of it. But that might be for another day. No, thank you again for the opportunity. And I thanks to Bobby for the insight. I learn something every quarter when I read that index. I learn something from every one of these discussions I have the opportunity to take part in, and we'll apply that here. We'll apply that here as best we can to help everybody. So thanks, guys.
All right, we'll have to get you connected with Jamin, and maybe we followed up with an appearance of yours on Logistics and Beyond, our logistics and transportation.
There we go.
Series. So, but all huge thanks, Eric Olson, outside sales manager, Total Quality Logistics, and you'll find his information one click in the show notes. Thanks so much, Eric.
Thanks, guys. Go Flyers. Have a great Q4.
All right.
Yeah, University of Dayton. That's right.
That was an expedited swoosh in and swoosh out there.
Yes.
We don't waste any time here. This is the Buzz on Supply Chain Now. Lively conversation dedicated to freight and all things transportation with this focusing on the freight payment index. Greg, let's take a few comments. What you think?
Yeah, let's do, because I think we've got some intellects out here we need to acknowledge.
That's right. All right, so Jamin, I want to put you on the spot. You sent me some observations over the weekend as you kind of dug in and shared some of your key takeaways from the freight payment index. I would love for you to share one or two of those in the comments. I know you've already dropped some knowledge there. I'd love to share those with the audience. So, Jamin, that's a challenge if you choose to accept it. So a couple comments here. Let's start with, so going back to that driver couple, that team that Mike shared. He said they were at a Grand Junction, Colorado, when they built that house they saved up for. The guy continued driving, and his wife got a job as a school bus driver. So they kept serving industry and serving the community. But that would be a great guest to get on a future show for sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
Let's see here. Jamin says, great point, Eric, when he said it just doesn't make sense. The best way to describe Q3 and 2020 as a whole. Completely agreed, Jamin. Our friend T Squared via YouTube is back, Greg.
I saw this question. That is a great one.
It really is. And we will have to circle back and see if we can't get some perspective on it. And Jamin, y'all feel free to share. But he says, with Coca-Cola shuttering 200 brands, is that going to create a capacity issue? Newly increased capacity no longer being used? It's a great question, T Squared. We'll see if we can get some comments.
I can't recall the proportion of their sales that those brands represented, but I know it was less than half.
Yep. So
a lot will depend. Plus, also, I don't know the specifics of their fleet, but I know they have significant dedicated fleet or owned fleet or bottler owned fleet that may not really impact the overall capacity in the marketplace. I'd love to, if someone knows, I'd love for someone to sound off on that.
Agreed. Rhonda shares the housing market is booming in Arizona too. Home improvement opportunities and money investments in our economy. That is a great point. Big impact that has throughout industry, certainly supply chain.
And great news for Arizona because it was down for a significant amount of time.
That is right. So Jamin says, challenge accepted. Big
There
thing
it
stuck
is.
out to him was what we discussed, the big call out of the challenge of driver training. Agreed, Jamin, agreed. And, that gets, each time, Greg, that gets so many comments and passion in these live streams and other programming. Ton of educated opinions around that. Huge issue we got to tackle. Jamin shares, because it was a challenge even before safety measures related to COVID, we need better driving training programs, as this helps not just in onboarding, but helping keep drivers on and prevent burnout and leaving the industry. Great point.
I think we need to rethink driving overall. One of the things that I've seen posited out there is relay driving. Never get outside of a day or two of your home port, your hometown, whatever it is. Shift the trailer to somebody else and then find a haul home, something like that. With the advent of technology, there has to be the ability to do that. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands, maybe more miles of bobtailing of empty trailers and tractors. So there must be some way that we can include that addition into the mix and optimize for that.
Yep. Good point, Sir Greg. And I think it's inevitable. I really do. Jamin says, also interesting that the Midwest, according to, again, the freight payment index, had first freight index increase in 5 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no shortage of conversations. We're going to have to wrap up here, Greg. It's fascinating. I love these conversations between the data and then some of the stories and observations. You get a perfect mix. As we mentioned, Greg, we've got the link to the report folks can sign up for, but also if you want to learn more about Supply Chain Now programming, go to supplychainnow.com, where we are working hard, powering the voice of supply chain, featuring conversations just like this from both our panelists and, of course, our community that jumps on and shares what they think. Right, Greg?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we want to give voice to this industry, and it's getting it big time. And our goal is to make sure that the whole world is part of that voice and that the whole world hears that voice.
Yep. And it's just that simple. That's right. One final programming comment here. If you are a driver or if you know a driver, we'd love to interview you as part of our programming. We'd love to get your experiences firsthand. I completely agree with what Greg was saying and some of the comments was saying. That is so fascinating to many people. You don't have to have a YouTube channel. You don't have to even have social media. We'd love to get your story front and center here at Supply Chain Now. So reach out. Amanda and Clay, I believe, are still with us. You can reach out in the comments here. You can shoot a note to Amanda at supplychainnow.com, and we'll get you teed up. All right. So, Greg, final comment from you, and then I'm going to sign off.
Well, I mean, look, I hate to keep going back to it, but every time we do this, this is the 4th quarter we've done it now, correct? Every time we do this, I recognize how valuable this data is. And this time, what I recognized is the value in it is that it is objective data, right? It is objective. It's not provided by one side or the other trying to do something or represent something with it. That is an incredibly valuable service to the industry. So if you want objective data and you need it, right? No fake news here. If you want objective data, this is the place to get it.
Yes, agreed. And, we didn't call this out, but Bob Costello with the American Trucking Association is part of the data and part of the economic inputs. So you talk about getting some non-biased, impartial information you can make better decisions with. So good stuff there. All right. So big thanks to, of course, Bobby Holland with U.S. Bank, Eric Olson with TQL. Big thanks to the whole team over at U.S. Bank. We've enjoyed all of their prep on the pre-show side. So Really appreciate that. To our audience, again, check us out, supplychainnow.com. Let us know what you're hearing, experiencing. Give us that voice. That guides all of our programming decisions here. On behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, Greg White and Scott Luton signing off today. Big thanks to Jamin, our fearless transportation logistics leader, who
Chris
joined
Barnes
us
too, yeah.
from the cheap seats. But hey, do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. And with that said, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.